My name is Hana Kaluznick, and I'm an assistant curator in the photography section here at the V&A. I've been working on a display of cameras for the new photography center that's opening here, and we've chosen 10 cameras that chart the history of camera manufacturing and design from the beginnings until the iPhone, being from the 1880s. This is the first camera in our timeline of cameras. This is what's called a sliding box camera, and it's made of mahogany. So there's lots of really intricate details about this camera that are quite beautiful. You know, we have the silver lens, which has the manufacturer's name engraved on it with the address and the plate size, 7 by 5 inches. So this camera was made by W.W. Rausch & Co. at 180 Strand here in London. And this little label was screwed on with tiny little screws. And the lens on the front. This lens is an instantaneous doublet, which I'm assuming is reference to the type of lens that they fixed onto the front here. We know it was made in the 1880s because of the mechanics of the object. When photography was first introduced in the late 1830s, camera focal lengths were fixed, so you were very limited in what you could photograph and how you could photograph it. And over time, they were looking for ways that they could be a bit more flexible in what they were photographing and how they could do it. So they introduced this mechanism, which is the sliding box. And by adjusting the length of the box, you could be further or closer to your subject. So that's it all the way out. And then you could push it back in. The placement of the sliding box or the bellows is fixed using this little knob down here. You can hear it's very hollow on the inside. There's nothing in here. There's no electronic or automatic parts. It's literally just a lens on a box with glass at the back. To take a picture using this camera, the photographer would sit or stand, and the subject would be in front of the lens here. So under cloth, the photographer would go like this, and around the back here, on this piece of glass, the photographer would be able to see the image in front of them. It's called ground glass, and it's a fairly regular piece of, at one time, transparent glass, and it was ground down using a gritty substance. And the reason that it's ground is because that's what they needed in order to be able to see the image that they were trying to take. If the glass was completely transparent, the image would have just flown right through. So this way, when it's a little bit opaque, the subject can be registered on the glass. And then this is called a plate holder. And they would use plate holders like this because at the time this camera would have been used, photographic materials were a lot different than they are now. Pictures were taken, or negatives were made using paper, glass, or metal. And they were dipped in a silver solution, which made them very, very sensitive to light. So a lot of this work, in terms of preparing the photographic materials, had to be carried out in complete darkness. So they would prepare their very sensitive plate and put it into this plate holder. And this is also mahogany and has the same sort of design detail, although a little less meticulous. You can see these lines aren't, they're not fully squared. So this, you can see, slides out like this. and the plate would have sat in there. So once you had your sensitized plate in this holder, the photographer would open up the back like this with their image all focused properly as they could see it in the ground glass. They would open up the back and slide the plate holder in like this. So now that the plate holder is in, this one always stays where it is. They would make sure that their subject was sitting perfectly still or smiling and slide this plate holder blind up, and that would expose the image on the outside of the lens onto the plate. So this could take anywhere from 1 to even 10 seconds depending on the materials that the photographer was using. So this camera, being from the 1880s, was made very much before a time when cameras were manufactured on a mass scale. Studio photography was very popular amongst the Victorians at the time that this camera would have been made. So families or young men, women, whoever had the means, it was very exciting to go and have your portrait taken in a studio. And I think that's probably the most common place that a camera of this type would have been used. Of course, depending on who the photographer was, maybe they shot still lifes, beautiful flower arrangements, or trays of delicious looking food. Across all of these types of subject matter, though, one thing that is important to remember is that exposure times were very long, so you had to be very, very still when you were having your picture taken.